UN peacekeepers leave Mali in a hurry and under fire. Sudanese families seek refuge in South Sudan. Plus, Ghanaian environmental advocates seek repeal of mining law. Hello and welcome to the Africa Update on Trust TV, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Ayuba Ile. Thanks for joining. UN peacekeepers ordered to leave Mali by the country's leaders have been forced to rush their withdrawal, destroy equipment left behind and risk their lives on the road out, campaigners said on Friday. Following a coup in 2020, the new military rulers in June ordered the peacekeeping out, proclaiming the failure of their mission and denouncing its alleged instrumentalization of the human rights issue. The following is an overview of this large-scale and risky operation, which brings to an end 10 years of efforts to try to stabilize a country plagued by insurgency.
The United Nations Multi-Dimensional Integrated Stabilization Mission in Mali, MINUSMA, whose strength has hovered around 15,000 soldiers and police officers, has seen 180 of its members killed. The original plan was for the peacekeeping force to have withdrawn from the West African nation by the end of the year. But already, the UN troops have been leaving their compounds one after another, with the first withdrawals as early as July. The MINUSMA withdrawal has exacerbated rivalries between armed groups present in the north of the country and the Malian state. These groups do not want the UN camps handed back to the Malian army, saying such a move would contravene ceasefire and peace deals struck with Bamako in 2014 and 2015. However, the army is pushing to take back control of the evacuated camps. After vacating 5 camps since August, MINUSMA completed its accelerated withdrawal from Tessalit in the northern Kidal region on Sunday. In the days running up to the pullout, shots were fired at its cargo aircraft and at its positions. Part of the contingent, mainly charging, left by plane, but the rest were forced to travel overland to go through more than 500 kilometers of desert under constant threat from armed groups. The withdrawal from Aguelhouk the following day happened under similar conditions, and the authorities did not give clearance for flights. According to MINUSMA, the withdrawing convoys were attacked by explosive devices, resulting in injuries. The GSIM has claimed responsibility. And on Thursday, a logistics convoy traveling from Ansongo to Labazanga in the Gao region came under fire. 3 civilian truck drivers were injured, one of them seriously, said MINUSMA. The UN peacekeeping force says it has had to destroy or decommission equipment such as vehicles, ammunition and generators that it was unable to take away in accordance with UN rules. Such losses of material could have been avoided if 200 trucks had not been blocked in Gao since September 24 by restrictions that the authorities imposed on them. According to MINUSMA, tanker trucks intended to supply convoys are also stuck in Gao. By speeding up its withdrawal, the UN peacekeeping force is upsetting the plans of the Malian army, which does not want to let the separatists fill the vacuum. Tensions are expected to rise further in Kidal following the UN departure. The region is a stronghold of the Tuareg rebellion and a major sovereignty issue. While the final departure from Kidal was initially planned for the second half of November, a MINUSMA official recently said it could be just a matter of days before the peacekeepers left. Non-essential personnel have been the first to head out.
Now, more than 114 million people are currently forcibly displaced worldwide, a record number the United Nations announced on Wednesday. According to the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, in a statement, the number of people displaced due to war, persecution, violence, and human rights violation worldwide probably exceeded 114 million at the end of September. In the first half of 2023, population displacement were mainly caused by conflicts in Ukraine, Sudan, Burma, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, but also by continuing humanitarian crises in Afghanistan and a combination of drought, flooding, and insecurity in Somalia. More than half of all displaced people have been forced to cross a border, the agency said. And just 3 nations, Afghanistan, Syria, and Ukraine, are home to almost a third of the world's displaced people. Now, Sudanese families seek refuge in South Sudan. In a distressing turn of events, families escaping violence and turmoil in Sudan are arriving in remote areas of northern South Sudan. These displaced individuals are seeking refuge in a region where humanitarian organizations are grappling with the immense challenge of providing emergency assistance.
Families fleeing Sudan are arriving in remote parts of northern South Sudan, where humanitarian agencies are struggling to provide emergency aid. Juma Ajol first fled her home in South Sudan to a refugee camp in Ethiopia's Gambela region and later moved to Sudan, where she hoped to rebuild her life. But when conflict broke out in Sudan in April, she escaped with her family across the border to South Sudan. I never wanted to come back to South Sudan because of the way we left in 2016. It's a terrible memory that still comes to my mind. I was in Bentiu when war broke out. We had to walk 14 kilometers from Bentiu to Gambela to find safety. We later settled in Sudan. The rainy season and a lack of donor funding has hampered efforts to help people move away from the border, worsening the humanitarian situation at the increasingly overcrowded transit center in the border town of Rink.
Our main role as UNHCR here is to manage the transit center, to ensure that refugees and returnees coming from Sudan have access to water, clean water. They have access to food. They also have available sanitary facilities, including core relief items when they just arrive.
The influx of South Sudanese returnees and refugees from Sudan is putting pressure on the limited resources of a country recovering from a protracted civil war and the devastating impact of climate change.
For UNHCR, we are taking all refugees to Maban, where we have the refugee camps. For the South Sudanese returnees, we are working closely with other partners like IOM to make sure they transfer them to their places of origin.
Since the start of the conflict in Sudan in April, about 6 million people have been forced to flee their homes in 6 months, with no end to the violence in sight. Many people seeking safety continue to arrive in neighboring countries.
According to a 2023 report by the Global Action for Sustainable Development, Liberia is losing an entire generation to drug abuse, with its capital Monrovia alone having more than 800 drug hubs and an estimated 100,000 drug users. An older generation of rehabilitated child soldiers have moved to join the fight against drugs using a behavioral therapy approach. Senanu Todd reports from Monrovia.
Along the Doo River in Monrovia is a community of about 150 youth notorious for illicit drug use and sales. Those who live here call the area Abule City and say it is a haven for unemployed and frustrated comrades to find some peace. Benedict Souza is a resident and leader of the community. He says Liberia's unemployment has driven many youths to desperation. Many resort to drugs to cope.
Abule contains all of the category habits. We get liquor people there, we get drugs users there, we get cigarette users there, we get opium users there, we get cool users there. Everybody forms part of our drugs.
Souza explains that while Liberia's unemployment has driven some youth into violent crime, Communities like the Abule city provide a kind of security to those who live there.
We don't allow intruders, much like criminals, to come into our midst because you have the community dwellers is resting upon us. We agree. These are hard substances that we need supposed to do. But because of situations where it's providing solutions, we do it. But now we're standing still. The community understands we are there doing it. And know that we are not bad people and will never be bad people.
A 2023 report by the Global Action for Sustainable Development says there are 866 ghettos like the Abule city in Liberia's capital alone. The report estimated that about 100,000 young people in Monrovia are involved in substance abuse. Advocates say Liberia's 14-year civil war in the 1990s and early 2000s birthed this epidemic.
Since the end of the Civil War, the issue of drugs started in the country, and at first it was actually being done by the warlords. They were given to the fighters in order to get them brave to the front line, because at that point they cannot be to their senses, so they get them brave to fight. Then after the war, it became a major business now in Liberia.
The Network for Empowerment Progressive Initiatives is a donor-funded non-profit that uses trauma therapies and cognitive behavioral therapies, CBTs, to help more than 500 former child soldiers adapt into society after the Civil War. Ball says the program is now using the CBTs to help young people struggling with drug abuse.
There are some that are carrying weapons. There are some that, because of the abuse of drugs, they want to maintain that status, they have become armed robbers. So based on our interview, we try to deal with those higher risks that are in the community.
Substance abusers are admitted to the program for 8 weeks, undergoing counseling and therapies that include life skills, training and support for resettling.
When they graduate from the training session, they do not have place somewhere good or safe to go. Those are some of the things we get involved to find a family member and tell them about the importance of accepting the back in their home.
NEPI graduated 314 drug-using youths from its first cohort in August, supporting them with funds so they can re-enter society. With support from former child soldier volunteers, they say they hope to tackle substance abuse in Liberia, one group of graduates at a time.
You're watching Africa Update on Trust TV. Coming up after the break. Ghanaian environmental advocates seek repeal of mining law. Join us again for more. Thanks for staying with us. Now, violence among the Eritrean diaspora has broken out in Europe, the Middle East and North America in recent weeks. Hundreds have been arrested in clashes between supporters and opponents of the Eritrean government. In this report from Stuttgart, Germany, Henry Wilkins speaks with members of the Eritrean diaspora about what has triggered these new clashes.
A peaceful Thursday evening in Roma-Kastel, a square in a residential area of Stuttgart, Germany. A month earlier, in September, the scenes could not have been more different. Pro- and anti-Eritrean government protesters clashed outside a building hosting a cultural festival organised by pro-Eritrean government activists. The festivals are often used as fundraising events for the highly repressive Eritrean regime, as well as to intimidate members of the Eritrean diaspora who have fled the country, according to the regime's critics. The government denies the allegations and says the events are cultural. One anti-government protester said pro-government members of the diaspora came out of the building hosting the event and began throwing insults at them.
Our people couldn't tolerate these insults, and immediately fights began to break out, using pieces of wood and construction materials. Then the police started to use tear gas to stop the fighting and tried to separate us, cutting us off and keeping them in the building.
Another witness to the violence shows how construction materials were picked up and thrown. Violence at Eritrean cultural festivals has become a regular occurrence in recent weeks across the globe, with clashes in Canada, Israel and the US too. Asked what the authorities are doing to stop the festivals, one diaspora member in Germany said,
"I can't say that the government of Germany has done all it can do. The problem here was that the hall was private property, which the government had no control over. So they tried to carry out the festival here, but because of our demonstrations, they couldn't."
German government officials said in a written statement to VOA it's doing all it can to prevent clashes between elements of the Eritrean diaspora within the confines of the law. Some Western governments have been proactive in shutting down the festivals. In Britain, authorities have prevented Eritrean cultural festivals from taking place. Meanwhile, the UK Parliament has called for an investigation into allegations members of the Eritrean diaspora in the UK are being extorted by the Eritrean government. Eritrean embassies in Canada, the UK and Israel were contacted for comment but did not respond. Emmanuel Ayasu runs a TV station in London that broadcasts news into Eritrea via satellite. The country has no independent media and consistently appears in the lowest ranks of the World Press Freedom Index. He says young Eritreans are beginning to stand up to the government.
Even though they don't support the government, they were not coming out in person to demonstrate. But now, especially the young people, they are standing up.
Habte Hargo is an expert on Eritrea. He explained,
"And the number of young individuals fleeing the country has increased substantially, I would say, over the last 6, maybe 7 years. And these are individuals who've been tortured and mistreated by the Eritrean government."
Human Rights Watch says more than 580,000 Eritreans have left the country as of 2021. Members of the Eritrea government have pledged to continue organising festivals in support of the government.
Now, as the world seeks strong leadership to find solutions to its many social, political and economic crises, Africa is celebrating 50 young people who are making a difference on the continent. They have been named Global Change Makers at an African Youth Summit in Rossonville, South Africa. Vicky Stork was there and now reports.
How can we juxtapose...
These young men and women have been recognized for having a big positive impact on their communities. And organizers of the African Youth Summit say they hope the youths will return home to inspire others to do the same. Gabriela Yeager, who co-founded the Global Changemakers organization, says about 1,250 young people have been selected since the organization was launched 15 years ago. They are given training, mentorship, networking opportunities and funding.
Personally, I believe that the grassroots work these young people are doing is immensely important, not only in terms of the results that the project itself is having, but also to show other young people that it's important to become active, that they can have an impact in their communities.
Lucanio Sonyamba of South Africa is one of the new global changemakers, selected from almost 5,000 entrants. Already an advisor to his government's Children's Commissioner, Sonyamba is hoping this new distinction will further his mission to help young people bridge intergenerational challenges in the workplace.
There's many instances where I've actually had to speak with my other co-workers and try to find that middle ground where we actually come to a consensus like, okay, I know that I'm younger than you and you're older than me and you've been doing this quite for a long time, but when you're wrong, I will address you in this manner respectfully, and when I'm wrong, address me respectfully.
Becoming a global changemaker in 2016 has made a massive difference to nutrition advocate Maureen Muketha of Kenya, who's at the summit as a facilitator. She founded Tule Vyema, which is Swahili for Let's Eat Right. It encourages young women to cultivate indigenous gardens for their household consumption and sell the surplus. So far, Muketha has reached 900 households.
Global Changemakers has equipped me with the necessary skills in terms of how to do fundraising, but also how to do proposal writing.
For the first time this year, Atia Kafia, an organization in South Africa that traditionally promotes the Afrikaans language and culture, partnered with Global Changemakers. Atia Kafia's managing director, Sanal Britt, says they hosted the summit at one of their holiday resorts called Houdini Spa and will provide funding for some of the projects of the South African participants. Britt says during the 4-day summit from October 17th to 20th, the new global changemakers learned skills and listened to panel discussions and lectures on a range of topics including tech, politics and finance.
What happens for them after this is that they have the opportunity to actually write business plans, to submit their proposals and to obtain possible funding to implement all of these projects in their communities. Obviously, when you have funding coming in, you also have a responsibility to report back, and we look forward to the results that they will achieve.
Global Changemakers is looking for partners to host next year's summit in Mexico for Latin America and the Latin community in North America. It will be hosted in Spanish for the first time.
Lawmakers in Ghana last year passed a law to allow regulated mining activities in the country forest reserves. Now, environmental advocates say that the law threatens protected biodiversity reserves and are petitioning the government to repeal it. Senano Tot again reports from Atewa, Ghana.
Ghana's Itiwa Rainforest is a globally significant biodiversity area, as designated by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. The forest is home to about 5 critically endangered species, including the white-napped mangabe. The reserve is also the source of 3 important rivers that provide water to more than 5 million Ghanaians. Yao Kran lives around the Itiwa, and she used to get her water from streams in the forest reserve. She says in the last 5 years, illegal mining and tree logging in and around the forest have ruined these bodies of water.
Growing up, we always drank water from the streams that came from the forest. They were very clear streams. But over the past 5 or 6 years, they have all been heavily polluted, and we can't even drink or cook with the water from these streams. Even the water running in the taps has been contaminated by this illegal mining, and we can't use it for anything.
In 2018, the government of Ghana signed a deal with a Chinese state-run company, Sino-Hydro Corporation Limited, to mine bauxite from the forest, an action that environmental advocates say is illegal and risks the lives of over 100 threatened or near-extinct species. Although the official mining of bauxite in the forest has not begun, communities that live around the reserve say the forest has been under attack since the deal was signed.
People are mining seriously within the forest. The illegal logging that is also going on. And the third issue is because the land, the traditional land that we farm on has been used for gold mining. And so people are entering the forest to farm.
In an attempt to police their forest, Tabi and his community-based organization have attempted to block road access to the forest to prevent access to tracks. They also criticize the government for not enforcing forest protection laws or prosecuting people who engage in what Tabi calls galamsey, the local term for illegal mining.
We think that the government has intentionally is looking elsewhere and allowing these galamsey people to destroy the forest so that they use that as an excuse, pretense to say that, oh, the forest has already been destroyed, and so if we are going to mine bauxite, why not?
In November 2022, the government of Ghana passed a law called the Environmental Protection, Mining in Forest Reserves Regulation. Environmental advocates say this law gives the presidency power to authorize mining in forest reserves that were supposed to be under government protection. They say an older law and guidelines for mining in production forests exempted globally significant biodiversity reserves, whereas this law targets them.
It is not in line with our commitment to climate action, towards mitigation and deforestation actions. It is not in line with Ghana's recently signed GBF, that's the Global Biodiversity Framework Agreement, which is seeking to create safe havens for biodiversity to exist. And our GSBAs are not only for biodiversity, they are also for the provision of crucial ecosystem services.
The government of Ghana declined to speak with VOA about the mining law, despite several requests. Civil society groups continue to petition the government to repeal the law and protect the country's forest reserves.
And that's a wrap on Africa Update for this week. Join us next week on the program. You can watch more via all our social media platforms and also on our YouTube live stream. I am Ayuba Ilya. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.